The preseason is officially over. Cutdown day is on Tuesday. What does this mean for the Jets? Who better to bring on to break down our 53-man roster projections than Jet X Factor's co-founder, Mr. Robby Sabo? It's a Sunday edition of NY Flight Jets Talk, and we are live.
J-E-T-S, Jets, let's go.
Jets wide receiver Wesley Walker. Wesley, how you doing today? ESPN writer Mr. Rich Samini, Jets reporter for The Athletic, Mr. Zach Rosenblatt, Hall of Famer and Jets legend Mr. Marty Lyons.
Your host, Connor Law.
Welcome in everyone. We are here the day after all the New York Jets preseason contests have come to an end. Cutdown day just 2 days away. There are a lot of players on the bubble of the roster. Who will make it? Who will not? Who better to bring on to talk all things New York Jets roster predictions than Mr. Robby Sabo of Jets X Factor? Robby, how you doing today?
Connor, how about that intro? Who created that intro? Was that you?
That was the great Gator McCluskey, who does all the graphics.
Gator, he does Asman stuff. Yeah, I've heard
Yes.
about this Gator name, but I don't know the face. Gator, legendary work. Good job.
Yeah, it's a great intro, but super happy to have you on. First time on the show, hopefully not the last. But Robby, first and foremost, how you doing today?
I'm good. Hanging in there. Sunday. Yesterday was a long day, doing a lot of video editing stuff, and then the Jets game at night. I don't think we learned too much from the game, to be honest. It was yet another slog, another defensive battle, or more aptly, pathetic offensive battle on both sides. And it's roster time.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, cutdown day is just 2 days away. With that being said, Robby, are you ready to get right into our 53-man roster predictions?
Yes, let's roll.
I'll let you take it away first with the quarterback position. We'll start off there. This one, there's some hoopla surrounding out of Peasley Martinez, who will make the practice squad. There, one seems to be the favorite, but who do you have making the Jets roster in terms of the quarterback position?
I think this is as cut and dry as it gets. Rodgers, Tyrod, too, and I do think Peasley has the. Without going back and watching the game again, I still got to go through the film with the Giants film, but I still think Peasley has the edge in terms of practice squad based on his deliberate incremental progression from OTAs. But I wouldn't be shocked at all if it's not Peasley and it's the UFL kid. But we'll see.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting. Like I've mentioned it before, it's definitely one of those lower leverage positional battles, but it's definitely one that's close and fans should keep their eyes on. Personally, I have Martinez. I think he showed more throughout the Jets' first two preseason games. Yesterday, he went 12 or 20, 99 yards. Didn't have a touchdown, but didn't turn the ball over. On the other hand, Peasley 5 for 11 with 75 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. I'd probably say, my personal opinion, I'd say Martinez has the edge right there just because, his ability to move, escape out of the pocket, and then also his experience in the UFL, winning the MVP over there. And then you obviously have Jordan Travis, who will most likely be in for a full redshirt season, starting the year on the non-football injury list. And you have the two obvious ones, Aaron Rodgers and Tyrod Taylor. But moving over to the running back position, after last night, Izzy Abanikanda is making a case to earn his spot on the Jets roster. What are your thoughts on Izzy? Do you see him making the Jets roster, and what does your depth chart look like for the running back position?
Well, really quick on quarterback, it's one of those situations where I think, Martinez flashed more, and he might have a higher ceiling. He definitely has a higher ceiling athletic-wise in terms of raw physical attributes. But Peasley, within a system, his grasping of a system, all those intangibles, I think that's what's going to win him in the tiebreaker. But we'll see. It should be interesting. I don't disagree with you in terms of the UFL kid. Running back, even though Izzy went off last night, I think it's going to be three. I think it's going to be Breece, Braylon Allen, and Isaiah Davis. I have a hard time feeling like Izzy's going to make it. I don't think they're high on him for, reasons we're not privy to. Perhaps not in between the lines reasons in terms of maybe work ethic, and these are just assumptions, nothing concrete. But I just know this. They're not in love with him. So I think they'd like to keep him, but I think it's going to be a roster crunch in the end where Izzy finds himself on another team.
Yeah, the thing with Izzy is he brings, he obviously we saw, a small sample size from him last year. He was the highest graded running back per PFF this preseason with a grade of 90.1, nearly 6 points higher than any other player. That's that's really, remarkable. And he's done everything he can to show the Jets why he earns a roster spot. Thing with Izzy, I really think it comes down to, like you mentioned, if the Jets really like him or not. And you seem to say the Jets don't really be quote impressed with him so far. The thing is, he's 23 years old. He has lightning speed. That's what he showcased throughout his college career. He showed a bit of that during yesterday's contest against the Giants. I feel like if the Jets put him on waivers, someone will claim him and take a flyer on him. Personally, I think what the Jets do with Izzy is they carry him as a fourth running back there, and then they make him a certain scenario where he's like inactive on game day sometimes. Personally, I don't think they should roster Izzy, but for some reason, I could see the Jets doing that to kind of protect him from other teams. And you have to keep in mind, these are also 53 players who the Jets do not want exposed to the waiver wire. That's also important to mention there. And like I said, someone I think will take a flyer on Izzy. But moving over to the wide receiver room, obviously a lot of talks between that Brownlee, Charles, and even Brendan Smith who stood out. How do you have the Jets carrying 6 or 7, and who are those guys?
7. I have 7, and it goes back to Izzy. I think either Brownlee or Izzy will be carried, and I think it's going to be tough to roster both because both guys, they don't really contribute anything on special teams. And sure, you could call him an inactive guy, a non-47 active roster spot, but having 2 is quite difficult. Um, right now, I have Brownlee way ahead of Izzy because the traits he shows, and he's not a crazy athletic kid. He doesn't jump off the page, but he makes plays where his attributes such as tracking the ball, body control, his hands, they're traits that are very tough to find. And I think the Jets love Brownlee way more than Izzy. And I think for that reason, it will be 7 receivers, which is a high number. But consider Irv Charles not a receiver. Consider
Yeah.
him the next Hardy as a special teamer. So you got Garrett, Lazard, Corley, Mike Williams, Xavier, Brownlee, and Irv. Did I hit all of them? I think that's a 7.
Yeah, that's basically, yeah, that's the 7 there. And Brandon Smith, who I personally think might be a practice squad guy who the Jets potentially look to develop there. Personally, I have the Jets carrying 6. I think it's, obviously you have Garrett Wilson, Mike Williams, Xavier
So
Gibson,
you
Allen
don't have
Lazard.
Brownlee?
No, I don't have Brownlee making the team. I don't have
Okay.
Brownlee making the team. It's I think it could go either way with Charles or Brownlee, but the Jets have seemed to really be impressed with Irv Charles' ability to play at gunner. I
Irv
do,
is a lock. Irv
yeah, yeah.
is a stone cold lock. I'd be stunned if he doesn't make the team because he's Boyer's guy. And funny, I ran into that trap a couple years ago with Hardy, and I wrote about it, and I thought this would be the year it would be a surprise Hardy cut, and they'd go to Eccles and some of the other young kids for special teams, but it didn't happen. So when they, and especially Boyer and special teams guys and special teams coaches, when they like a player and that's their dude, that's their dude. So I'd be stunned if Irv's not on the team.
Yeah, it's definitely really interesting. Like, do you want to use a roster spot on someone who's only going to play special teams like Irv Charles? But I mean, he had a team high special teams grade last year, 90.5. Like, you consider him a lock for the roster. I personally
Yeah.
think he's a very, very high shot. The thing with Brownlee is he had a pretty uneventful rookie year to start his NFL career, and then he got off to a rocky start in training camp, which definitely hurt him. He's picked it up as of late, but he hasn't really caught my eye throughout the full preseason, really. So that's why I have the Jets going with 6 receivers, and those are my 6. But before we get on, we have a few questions in the chat, but we'll go to the one about the wide receiver room. Dano asks, odds we carry only 5 wide receivers. Dom C had a hot take of possibly 5. Not obviously a hot take. Not obviously a hot take. Odds question mark.
5, I'd put it at 0.23%. I think it'll be
Wow.
I think it'll be a stunner if they carry that few. Because I mean, who are you going to cut? Irv and Brownlee? No, again, I'm calling Irv a lock. If I'm wrong, I'll stand and take the fire and stand on that firing line. But I'd be stunned. I think Irv is a lock, and I think 6 is the minimum. See, when it's very easy, and I used to and still do fall into this trap of when predicting the roster, you do math. everyone becomes a math teacher, and you try to balance it out. Okay, 25 offense, 25 defense, 6 receiver or 5 receiver. You can't go over that number. Blah blah blah. It's more week dependent. It's more opponent dependent. San Fran, it's more situational dependent. Who's injured, who's not. It's more practice squad dependent. Who is safer to get through waivers? So because of that, I think Brownlee, they'd be scared to let him go and expose him to waivers and have someone else snag him. I'm not saying it's a lock for that to
Yeah.
happen, but I think that's the case. And I think they wouldn't feel as bad if Izzy is lost. So 7. I'm definitely going 7 receivers.
Yeah, it's you could go 6 or 7, and Dana mentions Malik Taylor there. I thought they were carrying 7 all the way up till Malik Taylor got hurt. Like I think if Malik Taylor stayed healthy, he was on the right trajectory to make the roster. If Taylor stayed healthy, Robbie, do you think he had a real shot to make the roster?
I think he had a shot, but I'd still have him number 8 behind Brownlee and Irv.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely makes sense there. But moving over to the tight end room, we saw Yeboah go down. He was doubtful to return during last night's game. Kuntz had another drop. I mean, that ball went right through his hands. Definitely a tough one. We saw him make that tough play against the Panthers in which he did not get his feet in bounds. What are your thoughts on the tight end room? And the top 3 seem to be obvious, but who do you have?
Yeah, Kuntz has to make that catch, and far too often in practice, he just doesn't. He doesn't make those catches you have to have, or you have to make at this level. It's this is where we get into tricky waters because with no Nick Bowden gone, no fullback. I mean, there could be a fullback. You could carry an H back with Ferkser or Sefcik, the UFDA.
Yep.
But if you don't, then going with 3 is a little light. But I kind of see it in a similar light to last year. I have 3 right now at tight end with Conklin, Rucker, and Yeboah. And then Rucker's going to be the de facto fullback, H-back. And then they'll slide Kuntz into the practice squad. However, there's a chance he might outright get released. And they try to just let Sefcik be the de facto fullback, H-back on the practice squad. Whether Ferkser could get there or not, I don't know. He's a veteran. I know practice squad rules are a lot laxed as compared to yesteryear, but I think that's the plan. Those 3 tight ends, see what you can do with Sefcik and Ferkser in terms of backup plan.
Well, I think there's something I might have saw it. I think Dom C put something out the other day. I think it's with a Guavin, Hansen, Ferkser, and two of the other veterans. It's like I think there's some clause that they could go to the practice squad right away without having to clear waivers. So that might be
Oh,
some.
really?
Yeah, that might be something interesting to keep an eye on for Ferkser there. But in terms of Sefcik, that's an interesting way to look at that. Sefcik, I've always thought was probably I'd say the lowest on the depth chart compared to all those guys, just
Yeah,
based on.
don't look at him as a tight end, though.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I think you nailed it, those top 3 I have, but you mentioned Bud in there. I don't know if you saw Robbie, but did you see he got picked up by the Texans yesterday?
No, I missed that. So
Yeah.
yesterday, huh? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Aaron
I
Wilson
didn't
put it
think
out.
he was coming back. Initially, when they released him, I said, okay, maybe he comes back. But once the first week went by, that was it. I didn't think there was a chance because, and I don't think it's that they don't like him. I think they like him. He's just always hurt. And he was in the rehab area exclusively. Not all OTAs, but for a good chunk of the spring and all of training camp. And at some point, you just gotta cut bait.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you there. Keeping it going with the offensive line. Obviously, this is a more interesting one. I personally think the Jets will carry 10 offensive line. It's still up in the air. You have options. I thought Laval had a solid shot until I saw him snap the ball over Martinez's head about into the end zone. And then you have guys like Xavier Newman who got a little banged up last night. Chris Glacer, Jake Hansen. How many offensive linemen do you have the Jets carrying, and who are they?
Well, did we get news? I've been not locked in today because you saw I
Okay.
did that video
Yeah.
for us. Did we get news about Mitchell's injury yet?
I don't. Let's see. I didn't see anything. Um, let's see.
Because that's gonna be a big deal. I don't know how serious it is.
Um,
Let's put it
I-
this way: if Mitchell's fine, I think they're carrying 9. I
okay.
think it's the usual suspects at tackle. You got Fashanu, Tyron, Moses, Carter Warren, and Mitchell, and then 4 on the interior, which is we know the names: AVT,
Simpson.
Titman, Simpson, and Schweitzer. and that's light on the interior. But Mitchell could also play in the interior in a pinch. It's not perfect. I know a lot of people have Xavier Newman as a dark horse right now, but I think you could work Newman into the practice squad and feel relatively comfortable. Uh, they could easily go 10, but if you go 10, you're gonna shortchange it somewhere else. And I think 10, the best argument for 10 is the injuries that have happened the last few years. But I think I'm comfortable with those 9. The one thing that wouldn't shock me is if they move on from Carter Warren. And if that happens, I could see Newman being that guy.
Yeah, you mentioned I just wanted to get your opinion just on you mentioned Carter Warren there, Max Mitchell, both tackles of which both of which had their fair share of struggles. Well, obviously Warren was a rookie last year, but Mitchell throughout his first 2 years of his career. How important do you think it is that Olu Fashion is able to be that swing tackle and take over for either Tyron Smith or Morgan Moses as they've both had a ton of injuries throughout their career?
Yeah, I think it's important because Tyron could play both spots, but
Yeah.
you're never
Yeah,
gonna
why
put him
would
at
you?
you're
Yeah.
never gonna put him at right tackle. And in Moses, you don't want him at left tackle.
Yep.
He's a road grader on the right side. So having Fashanu to play both is pretty damn important. It's I think they handled it the right way too. Let him
Yeah.
play left tackle exclusively the first few weeks, get him into swing, and that's where he is now. So I think that's important. The depth in the interior is the issue. Schweitzer, he's got a great mind. He's not a crazy
Yep.
great athlete. So if something were to happen to AVT or Simpson or Tipman, it may be interesting. I think Glazer and Hansen, Rogers even shouted out Glazer once or twice this summer. I think trying to keep those 2 safe on the practice squad, I think is going to be a priority.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with your opinion there. Moving over to the defensive line, this is another one.
Whoa,
9.
wait, who'd you have? You had 10 with Newman?
No, yes, I had 10 with Newman because
Okay.
I went with Newman because of what he has shown throughout. I think what he's shown though throughout training camp, he stood out in the preseason as well. So I think keeping a depth piece there is really key, rather going light on the inside. And you could definitely mess around with that roster spot though along the depth chart. It's also important to note there are injuries on the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, talking about offense here, but there are injuries that still not in the quote exact timetable, no exact return. You have Isaiah Oliver, you have JBC. Those
Yeah.
the two of which are probably and then MC2 obviously is probably the bigger focus for the Jets right now, getting him back on the field. But moving over to the defensive line, obviously with the Reddick holdout, we'll start at the edge position. Do you have Reddick on the initial 53?
I do. But it's a toss up in terms of what's going to happen. My guess, gun to my head, is that he reports right before Labor Day weekend, so Friday of this coming week. That's just a guess. But I don't like. I just think his agent is leading him into the slaughterhouse. Like, there's no way they could win. The Jets aren't going to bend. I mean, the only way he could win is if the Jets get off to a bad start, and maybe he's hedging his bet that the Jets lose in San Fran and then they panic. But even if that happens, I don't think they're going to panic. So my best guess right now is that he will report, but he may not. At D-line altogether, I have them taking 11, which is a crazy number. But Salah has done it before. I think he's taken 11 once, definitely 10 before, definitely 6 edges before. And of those 11, the 2 that are, well, 3 that are, not the usual suspects are Tack, McKinley, McGregor, and Leonard Taylor.
Yep.
And I think all 3 of them are going to make it.
Yeah, absolutely. I have the Jets. So here's my thing. If Reddick shows up, I think it's going to be 11. If he doesn't, I think it'll be 10. Just because do you have Watts there? Oh, you didn't.
I don't have
Okay.
Watts.
You don't have Watts.
And
Yeah,
I think they, again, I think they want to keep him because he has the right body with the talent to try to replace a guy like JFM. But could play inside, in sub, outside, on the edge, in base. But I don't think he's going to make it. And you said if Reddick doesn't show up, it's 11. If he does, it's 10.
No, yeah, no. If Reddick does not show up, I think it's 10. If he does show up, it's 11 because he'll be on the
Okay,
roster.
gotcha. So he's just adding or not. Okay.
Yeah.
And who are your okay, so it's the same as me. The same 11?
Same
Okay.
as you. Like, my thing, I see a question about Clemens, we'll get to that, but it's like, my thing with Clemens, he's a lock either way. He's gonna make the roster either way, whether you like it or not. I think the main thing is you just gotta hope, like, that rookie production we saw at him, and do you think what we saw at him his rookie year, where he actually played fine, he was a rotational part of this Jets defense, do you think that's his ceiling?
Well, first of all, Clemens is just one of those polarizing guys within a
Yep.
fan base. Everyone needs to relax on Clemens. The fans need to relax, and I get it. He came on hot as a rookie. He had the tough guy act in the documentary.
Yep.
It took the fan base by storm, and 100% of the fans liked it. Let's be honest. Look in the mirror. You liked it. Fast forward, he's gotten into some fights. There's been untimely, terrible penalties. I get it. So the tough guy act wears a little thin. I completely understand. And now he's being punished because Reddick's not here. And, he's starting in base, and Jets fans don't want to see that. And I get it. He hasn't been productive. He's not a guy you want to see starting in any spot. But at the same time, I think he's a pretty solid number 7 defensive lineman on a roster. He could play inside if you really need him to in sub package. They asked him to try to play inside
Yep.
last year and put on weight. So I kind of will throw not last year out altogether, but with a caveat that they were trying to get him to do something different. So listen, he's a solid depth guy. Yes, he's a lock. They love him.
Yeah, it's absolutely. And the thing with Clemens is, you mentioned him having to slide in and be depth on the interior of the line. That was the main thing. He had to put on weight last offseason because they wanted him to adapt to that new role. I think that might have had something to do with his struggles last season compared to now. Salah's come out and said he's at the ideal weight they want him to, fully transition back to that edge position. Like you mentioned,
Yeah.
though, he still might have that ability from experience there last year to slide in his depth. I think I'll have a better year than last year, but I think the main name, who's, if Reddick doesn't show up, which I don't think he will by the start of the season, Reddick doesn't show up. I think the main name, obviously, it's, you have Jermaine Johnson, Will McDonald, who you hope will achieve great things throughout his career as a Jet. Obviously, no one could fill Reddick's shoes, as he has over 50 sacks these past 4 seasons.
Mm-hmm.
I think the main one who's going to take really the load is Tack McKinley. What he's shown throughout I thought he had a roster spot. Like, even if he did not get those 3.5 sacks, whatever it was last night, even if he did not accomplish that, I think he would have made the roster anyways. And he's a lock by now after his performance last game. But I think he's gonna be someone to watch step up. McGregor had a great game, and then Leonard Taylor was incredible on the inside. He was great on the inside, and I think he'll be the fifth guy for the Jets. They'll carry the top 4, obviously, and then you have between him, Tanzel Smart, who I thought played relatively well last night, and the Jalen Holmes. I think the Jets will end up going with LT there, but still, they've seemed to like Smart. I personally view him as a practice squad guy. Do you think his time's done with the Jets, or he could earn a spot on the practice squad?
Calling a guy who played at MetLife, or let me say East Rutherford, calling a guy LT who played at East Rutherford, how dare you, sir? Giants fans are losing their minds on you right now. I think the way you got to look at it without Reddick is in base. When they're going up against 2 tight ends or 21 personnel with a fullback, it's Clemens, and they really don't have a guy behind him. It's Clemens and JJ. You don't want McDonald in base. He'll play some base. You don't want really Tack too much in base. I think McGregor is the guy they're looking at to step up in base, but it's not an ideal situation. So Clemens, maybe McGregor in base, and then you got Tack, as you said. You got McDonald 1, Tack 2 in sub package. So it's gonna be it's gonna be production replacement by load. There's gonna be a lot of different guys, and when someone says, "Oh, they're going to keep 11 defensive linemen," that's crazy. Not really. I mean, it's a 4-3, so you got 4 starters. But the way that position rotates in today's league, you got to consider it 6, 7, 8 starters in reality. So 10 or 11 is not that much.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, you mentioned there the base set depends what you're going for, really, in terms of how many defensive linemen you want to carry, what their packages look like, where they would be playing. So it's definitely up for grabs there. Obviously, Watts I view as we both don't have him. I still view him as a practice squad guy, though, and it's remarkable that, like, first off, McGregor and Leonard Taylor, not LT. Leonard Taylor and McGregor could even earn a spot on this roster. It just goes to show how well they've performed coming in as undrafted free agents. Also, it's a really good problem to have that you're fighting over who's going to earn a roster spot like this.
Yeah, yeah, they have a lot of depth, and I mean, listen, what the hell was the Giants' offensive line doing last night? It was let's not pretend our guys really broke the fifth wall and Anthony Munoz out there. The Giants were a mess, but a solid job by the young kids.
Absolutely. Keeping it going with the linebacker room. This is even more of an interesting one. Chaz Surratt is someone who did not make the Jets 53-man roster to start the year, but was elevated for the first game against the Bills. He was one of the main players who sprung Xavier Gibson free to win the game. What are your thoughts on the linebacker room? Obviously, you have those Quincy, CJ, and Sherwood, but then after that, Sam McGuavin. I think could argue to even earn a spot on the roster. And then what are your thoughts on Zaire Barnes? What are your thoughts on the position group, and who do you have?
You said Surratt didn't make it initially. How many did they carry initially last year?
They carried 4 to start last year, I believe.
Barnes was the fourth?
Barnes was the 4th, and then Surratt was a practice squad guy to start the year.
Yeah, I mean, there have been years where he's gone really late with 4, like last year, and there have been years where he's gone heavier. And I think 2 years ago was the time they went heavier with 5 or 6. But even still, last year, with all the injuries, they wound up going 5 or 6 on the 53. I mean, there were games where Barnes, Surratt, and Iguovian were all playing. We're all dressed and playing special teams. So, I mean, not all 3, but they were all on the 53. 2 of them would dress and play special teams on the active 47. So 4-3 means linebackers, you don't carry a lot because it's a 11 personnel league with 3 receivers and 3 corners. And that means that you're playing 4-2-5 most of the time. Sometimes 3-3-5, sure, but you don't need many linebackers. Where it really helps is special teams. And they love all 3 guys in special teams. Sherwood could also play special teams. So right now I have 5. And it's going to be Surratt and Barnes. I know they love Surratt a lot, and he's a former quarterback who's a very smart dude. But he falls in the Bowden category as well with injuries. So maybe it is a case where they don't keep him on the 53 because they know other teams won't be that interested because of the injury history. I could see that. But I'm pretty certain they don't want him going anywhere. So I got 5. Iguovian's the guy who doesn't make it.
I have the exact same lineup with Iguovian making the practice squad there. Yeah, right. Surratt's definitely.
And he's like 30 by now too. Iguovian. Yeah. He's not a young pup.
And then Surratt's definitely an interesting one you mentioned there. Yes, he did. He played quarterback at UNC. He was a Tar Heel throughout his college career. You don't see many players, be able to transition not only to a different position, but the complete other side of the ball as a linebacker there. And then obviously we saw in Hard Knocks last year, Saleh really seemed to showcase his love for Surratt. So yeah, so we both agree there on the linebacker room. Excuse me. You have to hope Sherwood could make that jump. I think Sherwood's gonna have a great year this year. I definitely think
he was one of the bright spots this summer, especially early in training camp, late July, early August. His pass coverage was, the instincts were really showing. He was doing some really good things, even against Aaron Rodgers. So I think Sherwood's, and he's a former safety who, Auburn had him play deep at times, solo high or too deep, it looked weird because he was always a big dude. But he's got those skills, and he's one of those kids that continually learns, like an Ashton Davis, who we'll get to. And I think Sal and Douglas really love those guys, which I think is a key to the quarterback spot, like I said with Peasley.
Yeah, absolutely. Really interesting. Speaking of someone who's converted to a position, there's someone in this next position group who converted from safety to actually cornerback, and we're talking about Jarek Bernard-Converse here. He's currently out with an injury, but just as the cornerback room as a whole, obviously they have the biggest, best trio in the league. Personally, I think, and then obviously MC2 is still dealing with that injury. Who do you see making the roster there, and what are your thoughts?
I think I have it 6 deep right now. And that's where they're banged up most, obviously with MC2 and JBC and who's the other guy? That's right. There was one more.
No, so you have Sauce DJ, MC2, Eccles, Stiggers, Codrington.
Oliver's banged up, but he's technically a safety.
He converted this year, yeah.
Right. So assuming And Salah said it the other day that he thinks Carter and JBC will be fine by the start of week 1. I don't know if he included Oliver in that, but assuming they don't throw any of them on the pup to start the year or on IR or anything, I have 6. And it's going to be the top 3 that we know and love. Eccles, JBC, and Stiggers.
Yeah. So here's the thing. I obviously have the same top 3. I'm gonna ask you a question about Eccles here.
Yep.
Eccles' contract is expiring, and as time goes by, you look at a player like Eccles. He had that crazy game against the Dolphins 2 years ago. The Jets like him because he could also play gunner as well. Same with Isaiah Oliver, and quite frankly, I think Stiggers could probably play gunner as well. What we've seen from him so far. What are your thoughts on the possibility of maybe flipping Eccles for a late round pick to open up a spot on the roster?
It's not a bad idea. I think the cutoff, the rub here is I would only do it if I'm blown away by the draft pick. Because I get it. I get the front office thinking that you're thinking, hey, we have a lot of depth at corner. The contract is expiring. He has talent, and the NFL knows he has talent. So maybe a shopper will come by and give us a solid pick. But if it's a late round pick, a 6th rounder, I'm probably not doing it because he's incredibly valuable in terms of playing outside and inside. And yeah, JBC has been solid this offseason. So has Stiggers, but still, I think Eccles is beyond a level above those guys right now. And I don't want to lose that. Plus, I don't think DJ Reed will be back next year. So keep the cornerback talent in the building. Mainly because Reed and mainly because I don't think the return will be worth it.
Okay, yeah, I understand what you're saying. I understand both sides of the stories why you would possibly want to trade him, which is my thought, and then the other way as well. The main reason I thought about it is really because Brandon Codrington, obviously, he did not
Yes,
have
we'll talk about him.
yeah, he did not have. He didn't have such. He had a fine game last night. I didn't think he really necessarily stood out. The thing I like about him is he's just so electrifying. He reminds me. Obviously, I wasn't alive to see him, but I've seen a ton of his highlights. I met him at training camp, and I told him,
Yep.
I said, "B-Cod, you are going to be the next Devin Hester." That's what I told him he's going to
What
be.
was his response?
He said thank you, and then he dabbed me up. So that was
Okay.
B-Cod's response to that. But
B-Cod. You're on a nickname basis level with this guy, right? B-Cod.
yeah, it's definitely interesting because it's like even he had I think he had like a 10-yard return last night where he still broke like 3 tackles on. It's just like every time he has the ball in his hands, he's so electrifying, and it's like you have to always watch because 2 seconds later you turn your head and the 63-yard return is what he had against the Panthers. What are your thoughts on a player like Codrington, and could you see the Jets possibly going with him? Something that's interesting is with JBC's injury, the newer rule is you could start him off on the IR and then elevate him once he's fully healthy. That might be something to watch if the Jets really want to go to the well with Codrington. I personally think they should. I just don't necessarily see him doing that. What are your thoughts on Codrington and that possibility of starting JBC off on the IR?
I tweeted out my roster prediction before the
Yes.
Giants game last night, and Codrington is a flip of a coin for me right now. Unfortunately, I paid close attention to him this summer in terms of slot corner. He's got that makeup to be a slot corner. He didn't fare well defensively. And listen, he's young. He's a UDFA. He's a young kid. He didn't impress me defensively.
He's also 5'9", which is
Yes.
undersized.
Yeah, he's undersized, but he can. There's a possibility they were slot corner. The thing that's going against him is he didn't impress defensively. He's the guy I think will make it if anything were to happen, like in terms of if Hassan doesn't report, if one of the corners starts on IR, I think Codrington will make it. And I have a sneaking suspicion that maybe he does squeeze his way on there somehow, some way. But I left him off for now because I just don't know how right now.
Yeah, the most realistic way I could see it happening is the JBC thing where they, the groin injury, I think is what, he's dealing with the groin, and then Oliver's with the tissue injury or whatever, hand tissue or whatever it is. But that's
the
most
problem too. The problem too is he's splashed. He made some plays in the preseason on TV. So the Jets know this, and the likelihood that someone grabs him if they try to put him to waivers is very, very high. So he's one of those guys where it's extreme one way or the other. Either you keep him or you lose him. There's no middle ground. So that's the thing that's very difficult in predicting his fate.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's what I said, like, right on my post-game show after the Panthers game. I was like, someone will take a flyer on him. Like, if you put a player like, especially with the new rules, teams are hunting for guys like him who, could be that electrifying guy who makes those big plays. And with the new rules, it's so interesting because it's like with his speed, his agility, cut to the outside. It's like once you get past that first line of defenders, all you really have is the kicker to beat. So you put a player with the speed and agility like Codrington with those new rules. It just it meshes so well. That's why I think no matter where he goes, if he's with the Jets or not, I think with these new rules, he's going to be a top kick returner in the league. My hot take of the year was I said Brandon Codrington was going to make the Jets 53-man roster, and he was going to be top 10 in yardage for kick returners. That was
Mm,
my
yeah,
I was
and
asked to do a hot take. That was mine. What are your thoughts on that?
no, it's a solid hot take.
Thank you.
Tip of the cap. You got to be rooting for it now for him to make it. He just the problem is they have a lot of. I don't want to say a lot. They have a decent number of kick returners. That's the problem. If they were really dire at that position, I think they'd keep him in a heartbeat. Or if he really showed something defensively, I think they'd keep him in a heartbeat. But those are the two things that are going against him. He didn't really, jump off the screen defensively, and they have other guys that could do the job kick returning. But again, it's a flip of a coin. He's the guy I struggled with most when tweeting that out last night.
He also had he had an offsides penalty. I know that he lined up offsides one time,
Yeah.
and then I believe he had a holding penalty as well. The thing is, though, his path to the roster is through special teams. Like obviously, it helps if you could that would help him tremendously if he had like a Shamar Bartholomew preseason where he was one of the highest graded cornerbacks. But it's like if the Jets roster him, it's because of his ability on special teams. It's like Justin Hardy throughout his tenure with the Jets, he played one singular snap on defense. So it's like again, these are guys that are only going to play special teams. But cornerback is definitely one of the more intriguing rooms in terms of how many will they roster and who will those be. The JBC injury is what makes it most interesting. But keeping it going, we're going to move over to the safety position. Obviously, this is a hard room to crack because you have the top three within Chuck Clark, Tony Adams, and Ashton Davis. After that, Isaiah Oliver, who's currently dealing with an injury, and Mr. Irrelevant, Jalen Key. Who do you have there for the Jets?
Yeah, four
Yep.
with the top three and Oliver. Oliver really didn't
So much,
impress,
yeah.
I think, this summer, but that signing that Solid knows him. I think how long has he been in San Fran?
Who?
Oliver. How old is he at this point?
I think he's like 28, 29. So he's that. No, I think he's not that. Let's see.
I can't remember now if Solid knew him for maybe one season they crossed
He's
paths.
27. He was selected in the second round of the 28. He started his career off with the Falcons. He joined San Fran. And no, he only played 1 year in San Fran. So just this past season, he was with Atlanta the
Oh
whole
wow, that's right. He was
yeah.
with okay. So it still probably doesn't change my mind because of the signing. I think he makes it. And Jalen Key, I kind of liked what I saw, but when sixth rounders, seventh rounders, they're just like UDFAs in a lot of ways. And
Yep.
Douglas, the good GMs never want to cut a draft pick because that's dead money. Even if it's a little bit, it's dead money accumulating. But Douglas broke the chain and did it last year with Kuntz, and Kuntz didn't make the first 53, went right to the practice squad. So I see that again for Key this year.
Absolutely, yeah. It's the thing is the only reason I could see the Jets rostering Key is because what we've seen from them these past few years, especially in the Douglas Sala eras, they don't really like to put guys the draft picks. No matter, like for example, they started Kuntz on the practice squad last year, what was interesting. But the only really reason the Jets carried 4 running backs last year is because of Izzy. Like he was the reason the Jets carried 4 running
Well,
backs.
and Brees was slow to come along too.
Yeah, and because of the ACL injury and everything,
Yeah.
and then also they had to have Cook and Michael Carter on the roster as well, so that also was a contributing factor. The only reason I could see the Jets putting Key on the roster is maybe because, hey, they're scared another team's going to pick him up. But I could see a guy like Key being on the practice squad. If you look at his
Yes.
college numbers, he played most of his snaps at special teams, and then after that, he's I think he's known from what I've seen on him. When I remember I was looking at him when the Jets drafted him, he seems to be known for his IQ of the game, how he it's how he knows the game. That is what seems to make him such a valuable player. But safety again, it's tough because those top 3 are locked, and then Oliver really hasn't proven much, but I think he'll make the roster, and then Key seems to be the odd one out there, and it makes things even more interesting because like JBC is converted to cornerback this year, and then Oliver
Yeah.
converted to safety from
Yeah,
cornerbacks.
you kind of want to look at it as a whole. So I have 6 corners, 4 safeties. That's
Yep.
10 DBs. You got Oliver who could play both spots. You got JBC who could play both spots. Even Michael Carter played some safety in college. So 10 is the right number for DBs around there. Is there a world where they keep 11 with Codrington or with Key? Sure, but it's going to be very difficult.
Yeah, absolutely. Keeping it going. Last position on the I think this might be the easiest one. Special teams. Do you have
Mhm.
Austin Seibert as the Jets starting kicker or no?
I do not.
Okay,
I
yeah.
do not. If it were Tom Tupa, maybe he could be the backup punter and quarterback, but not today.
Yeah, so obviously you have those Hennessy, Zerline, and Morstead. You're just looking to have, repeat what you did last year, obviously, by re-signing Morstead and Zerline, have a top special teams unit, and that was one of the main contributing factors that helped the Jets win games. But Robbie, I really appreciate you joining me, and it's time to wrap up. We just passed the 40-minute mark. I appreciate everyone watching, but Robbie, I ask a signature question to every single one of
Yep.
my guests that comes on the show.
Yep.
4 dinner guests, anyone in the world, dead or alive, who are you taking?
Oh man, this is something I gotta think about. That's how do you that's one to spring on me. 4.
4.
Let's do um I'll try to randomize it a little bit in terms of
Okay.
in the moment and all time.
Mm.
You will be 1. Cod will be 2 because I want to see that interaction.
Yep.
Um, we'll go Namath 3 because
Yeah.
he's just trying to get by. That's all he was trying to do back in the day. And in a lot of ways, him and Arnold Palmer changed sports. I'm old, but I wasn't that old to live in the '60s. But everything I've read and seen, I'd love to talk to those guys. Ali would be another one too, but we'll keep it Jets centric. You, Cod, Namath, and we'll bring Corbett too. Corbett
Oh,
for the
yes.
toughness aspect.
Absolutely, and Namath's definitely an interesting one just in terms of, like, I've always wanted to see, like, if Namath played in today's game, what he'd be like with obviously the media and everything. I think that would be really interesting, like, if you threw Namath's ability when he played in the '60s and '70s, like, if you put that in today's game, how would he be? Obviously,
Yeah.
he won the Jets their only Super Bowl of coming, of course, in 1969, but Robbie, really appreciate you joining me, everyone. Thank you guys for watching, and now it's time for your final thoughts.
My final thoughts?
Yep.
Namath with social media would have been a heck of a thing. I'll tell you that.
Oh,
Yeah,
mhm.
Namath and social. I think. Hey, the final thoughts. I don't think there'll be crazy surprises on cut down day. Um, the itinerary. I think tomorrow. I don't know if I think there's a media availability tomorrow. So if so, and it's in person, we'll have a pretty good idea tomorrow in terms of who's on the roster, and we'll start getting news tomorrow. And I don't think there'll be a ton of surprises. But it'll be interesting to see how Douglas navigates the Reddick situation. That'll be my number one thing.
Yeah, and I think is it Douglas? I think Douglas might be speaking tomorrow. I think he might be the one who I think 'cause I think I heard he was I heard he was doing something at the end of camp, so he might be tomorrow or there's a show or maybe after cut down day they do him after
What's
that
today? The 25th.
25th, yes.
Okay, nothing tomorrow. Tuesday. Okay, so nothing tomorrow. We'll know Tuesday because when we show up at practice Tuesday, the field will look half empty. It happens every year where they
Yep.
go from 90 to 53. Now, well, actually, near 70. In actuality, with the practice squad, it's only 20 less guys, 22 less guys, really, but still, it feels empty. So Tuesday practice, Wednesday nothing, Thursday Joe Douglas is speaking Thursday.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense after cut down day. But like I said, Robbie, really appreciate you joining me. Everyone, I really appreciate the support. Thank you guys for watching. And as always, JTS Jets, Jets, Jets.